Welcome back to the Run Radio podcast. My name's Trina Wilcox. My guest today is a children's author, host of the Mommyhood Empowered podcast, and keeper of little humans, Tiffany Tutu Coryell. Welcome.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
It's nice to have you here. You've got a lot of plates that you try to keep spinning in the air. And
Yes.
I was just listening to your most recent podcast, and we're both summer girls, love the heat, and you're looking forward to having time with your kids. What are you looking forward to most of all once they're home this summer?
I'm looking forward to the slower mornings.
Yeah.
I just don't like that, where you have to get up and immediately run out the door. So I'm looking forward to being able to just kind of relax a little bit more in the mornings instead of having to do that. So
I get that. I'm one of those hit the ground running. And when I get that chance to pull back, I'm kind of like, why am I pounding the pavement so hard? It's just not right.
exactly. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to, maybe an hour or more by myself before the kids have to get up,
Yeah. Yeah. Just to reflect, or is that when you write? What do you do with that hour?
So usually with that hour, it depends, it depends on the day, but usually I will write or I'll do exercise. It's something that gets my mind where I feel like I did something for me that day. A lot of times that's whenever I use that time for devotions and reading. It really helps me be able to get through the rest of my day. If I have a little bit of me time at the very beginning and feel like I got in something for myself, I can give out to other people so much easier.
Well, exactly. That feeding into yourself so you can put out is really important. So it's
That's all right.
It's very wise. Something we have in common, we decided to tackle writing a children's book in 2020.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it was one of those things, I've got the time. I decided to put the words to paper. What was it for you, the process like? Why then?
I actually had a little bit more time. Now, I did have two very small children at home at that point. They were 3 years old and 1 year old. So time was to myself wasn't exactly what it might have been for somebody else with older kids.
Yeah.
But I still had a lot of things that were taken off my plate for me. So a really big thing was I didn't want to listen to people talk about 2020 for the rest of my life and want to cover up my ears and go blah, 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 blah. I don't want to hear you say that. I wanted to make something positive out of 2020. And 2020 ended up being really great for a lot of reasons other than just the fact that I finally wrote that book. But it definitely helped make 2020 something that I'm excited to talk about 2020 now. It doesn't seem like it's something that I don't want to talk about. But yeah, writing the children's book was something that I had always wanted to do since I was a little kid myself. And it was one of those things that I just couldn't get away from. Every year I would put it on my list of things that I was going to do that year. And then it just never happened. And so it would be like rollover minutes. I would just roll it over to the next year, the next year, the next year.
All right.
And then finally in 2020, it was like, this is happening. So actually it was in April in 2020, and it was a sunny day. It was a nice day. And I remember I had just put my daughter, my 1 year old, down for a nap. And my son was playing behind me with his dinosaurs. And I just pulled my chair out into our backyard in the grass and the sunshine. And I wrote the first draft of the book that is now What Did Your Dinosaur Do Today? So I wrote it about dinosaurs because he was playing with dinosaurs behind me on the back porch. So who knows what the book would have been about if he had been playing with something else. So
that's really exciting. Mine was also on I remember it being a hot day because I went out on the deck and I was just focused on going through and making changes, getting like for mine, I used rhyming words. So making sure I got the right words and all that kind of stuff. So, when you had that first draft finish, were you just like thrilled, or were you just a little bit like, you know, I know what's next, which comes a lot of the editing and all that kind of stuff. So what was that like?
yeah, I knew that I would want to remember that moment.
Yeah.
And so I called my son over and he sat in a little chair with me and we took a little selfie. So I love
Aw.
looking back at that selfie, just knowing that, that was the moment that I had, kind of finished that very, very rough first draft. The final
Yeah.
product was a lot different than what it was. But that rough draft, I knew I wanted to be able to remember it. And the way I remember things is I take pictures. So that's what I did. But then it was that feeling of, okay, now what? So I
Mm-hmm.
have, this word, I actually have, semi committed to this thing. I've put some work into it. And now what? How do I get it into something that I can actually enjoy? And honestly, it just doors were opened for me that enabled it to happen because I had zero clue
Yeah.
how to do that. I had never written a book before. I, at that point, didn't know anybody that had written a book before. And thankfully, I just, what I did is I just started out on social media. That's what you do these days, right? I took a little picture of my rough draft, one of the pages, and I was like, hey, does anybody know like how to publish a book? And from that, one of my friends said, hey, I know somebody that actually published a children's book. So why don't you contact her and just see? And that person was extremely gracious in helping me figure out what the next step is. And that's why I always, if anybody has a book that they want to do and they don't know what the next step is, then I love helping them, because I would have never been able to publish that book, known where to start, if
Yeah.
somebody hadn't come along and helped me to.
Same. I feel the same way. And people that have written before they get it and they are willing to jump in there and help you. So it's really great to have that community. So with a kid's book, usually one of the biggest appeals, especially to the kids, are the illustrations. So was that something you already knew an illustrator, or did you need to get connected one, or did it cross your mind to do it yourself?
It did not cross my mind to do it myself.
Okay.
I cannot even draw a stick figure person, and that's not a lie. It's very much the truth. It doesn't look like much. So nobody would want to write a book or read a book that I had illustrated. So whenever I wrote the book, I had in my mind who I wanted to ask. They happened to be friends of mine. And I thought it would be really neat for them to illustrate it. They had never illustrated books before, but they're artists. They do other things. And I wanted to ask them, but I didn't want to ask them without asking God first, if that's who I should be asking. I didn't want them to feel obligated to say
Right.
yes just because we were friends. So I decided that I would take, I think I told God maybe, I don't know if I said like 3 weeks or what it was. I said, I'm just going to pray about it and see what I think. And then if I feel like I'm supposed to ask them, then I will. And if not, then I'm just trusting that something else is going to be put into my lap where I know where to look for an
Mm-hmm.
illustrator. So just kind of left it up to him. And then it didn't take very long, within the first week of me deciding to just sit and wait and
Yeah.
see, then my illustrators actually released their newest line, which was dinosaurs. So I thought, and because I mean, dinosaurs are kind of a niche thing. I don't know that everybody wants to draw a dinosaur or can draw a dinosaur. To me,
Yeah.
that seems pretty unique.
Right.
And I had never seen them draw a dinosaur. They do a lot of nature inspired art and 70s kind of style. Their company is named Crisara Designs. They are local to where I live. And like I said, they're friends, but they do great work. But I just never seen them draw a dinosaur before. But whenever they released that line, then I thought, okay, this is the sign I need. They
Mhm.
obviously have drawn a dinosaur. Now, the dinosaur that they drew in that line that they had released is different than the dinosaurs in my book. And I was so excited whenever I did ask them, they said yes. And they said that they had actually always wanted to illustrate a kid's book since they were young. So I loved
Nice.
how that was such a great example of how I had a dream, they had a dream, starting back whenever, we were 7, 8 years old, so long. And neither one of us, we were friends. They're twin sisters. So we had been friends for several years, but we had never discussed ever that I had a dream of writing a children's book, and they had a dream of illustrating a children's book. Just
Neat.
happened to come up, I guess.
That's cool.
And so it was neat that we both got to fulfill our dreams. And now they are my illustrators. I have 3 books out now, and they've been my illustrator every single time. And it's been such a joy to work with them. I think it's really important to be able to trust the person that you're handing your words over to,
Yes.
and just knowing without a shadow of a doubt that they're going to make something beautiful from it and make your words come alive. Because like you said, kids, they want to see the pictures. They want to be able to just kind of lose themselves in the pictures and be entertained while they're hearing the words.
So you had some built-in critics with your kids. Did you get instant feedback from them, or did you kind of tweak it and then just go about it yourself? How did that work?
So the only book that I've really involved the kids in much is that first one. It's the
Mhm.
dinosaur book. And my son, he really did help me go back and forth with the rhyming words. You know, it was me and him most days. And because it was 2020, so we were kind of in the house together. I didn't have a lot of interaction with anybody else. My husband was at work. And so whenever I needed to like bounce ideas off of him for the rhyming of words and what we should use, then I would ask him, and he would always give me his opinion. He was only 3, but he was really into it.
Mhm.
And he
Oh,
would give me his, you know, his
nice.
opinion on it. And the book really, I think it took a lot of pressure off of me, because I never imagined that I would publish that first book for mass consumption. I really just intended to write my child a book and
Oh.
just have him think, how cool is that, that my mom wrote me a book and it's on his bookshelf. And then I thought, you know, I'll pass it out to our friends and things like that. But I never assumed that it would be anything that I would want to release out into a larger market at all. And so it really took a lot of the pressure off. I was really writing that book specifically for him. A lot of the wording in that, the things that the dinosaur does, it takes it through a day of a child, essentially, like the little moments of the day, the ways that kids play, the
Mhm.
ways that I saw my son playing really honestly for the first time. Because ever since that he had been born, you know, we spent time together, but he was always in a childcare situation. And this was the first time the childcare place, it closed down. So it
Yeah.
was me and the kids for the first time. And I'm grateful for it, because it made me realize all the little things I had been missing about the ways that he played, about the ways that
Hmm.
he thought, about the ways he interacted with his toys and the world around him. And so I was able to incorporate those things into the book, and it's kind of seen through the eyes of a dinosaur. Probably one of the favorite pages in that book is whenever there's a T-Rex sitting on a
Yeah.
toilet.
Yeah.
And it's that page is in there because my son finally potty trained during 2020, and it was such a good time. I'm so excited. So that's probably, and it's a funny picture too. But you know, it was just him, watching him, and the book was specifically for him. So yeah, he definitely helped me. And my daughter, I tried to get her ideas on, I wrote, what did your baby doll do today for her? And that was
Yeah.
whenever she turned 3. So the running joke in our house is that you turn 3 and you get a book.
Oh, book.
But she wasn't too excited necessarily about seeing it, um, or you know, hearing the words and things like that. You know, she was just kind of more like whatever, and it was fine. So she likes it now that it's all completed. I guess
Good.
she just wanted to see the full product instead.
She has a different vision. She wants to
Yes.
see the
And
finished.
thankfully by that time I had already published 1 book. So
Yeah.
I kind of knew I had more people in my life that, you know, could help me edit it instead of a
Yes.
3-year-old.
Right.
So although my 3-year-old was a lot cheaper
Yeah, no kidding.
in some ways.
What was it the feedback from your son, the reason you kept going and deciding to, make it available to other people and to also write more? Or was it just because you enjoyed the process and the passion so much?
I did enjoy it so much. You know, I thought writing the first book would be a one and done. It would scratch that itch that had been
Yeah.
bugging me for literally decades. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to get this annoying little thing off of my back. You know, I'm going to get it done. I can cross that off the list and like move on. But then whenever I saw the book sent to me and it was approved but it had the illustrations, it had the words, and it was actually in bound book form. I remember unwrapping it from its package the first time and just being hit with a wave of realization that this book was not just for me, it was for the world. You know, I felt like God was saying, it's not just for you. You thought it was, but
Yeah.
it's not. And so I said, okay, you know, but if you, again, it was one of those things like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get it into the world. I know how to get it into my son's hand at this point, but I don't know how to get it further than that. And you're going to have to take care of that for me too, because I don't even know enough to know where to look. And again, God was so gracious about literally dropping people in my lap that could help out with that. And then after that, it just, you know, the scratch, the itch was not completely scratched. And I decided to write the baby doll book for my daughter. And then my latest book that actually is released just very recently. It's What Did You Talk to God About Today? And I always say that is for all the children of the world. And it's a great, it's my favorite yet, I think, actually.
Really? That's neat. Okay. Tell me a little more about it.
So in that book, it helps kids understand that they can talk to God about anything. And so it just kind of goes through some things that might be going through a kid's heads, maybe some things that they wouldn't even think about talking to God about. You know, maybe they lost a cat, maybe they got a scrape on the playground, maybe a friend made them cry, hurt their feelings. Or maybe there's a sleepover that's coming up that they're really excited about, or they're trying out for a school play. But just getting the kids really used to being able to comfortably talk to God. It's really a conversation, just knowing that He's there with them, whether it's on the playground or whether it's in bed right before they go to bed. And this book has children from different nationalities that are kind of portrayed, and it's set in a beautiful outdoorsy setting. So, like, for example, the sleepover page, the kids are covered in big leaves. And there's one where it talks about singing a song and the child is in a waterfall that's coming down. So it's just really fun. Again, back to the illustrations. They're just great.
Good. And that's already released. People can go find it.
It is. Yep. It's available for pre-order right now as we speak, but May 14th, it should be available for actual purchase on Amazon, Barnes and Noble online. So those are two of the typical places that people find them.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast. When was Mommyhood Empowered born?
Yes, that was born, let's see, it's been about a year and a half almost ago.
Okay.
So I released it, it was in February, I guess that would have been of 23.
Okay.
And that was something that had been in my mind to do for a while. I love listening to podcasts, love it, love it. And then it was, again, that slow little voice, that thing that wouldn't leave that said, you should have a podcast. You know, I don't know if you've ever had these things, but you just keep trying to push it away and go, oh, that's for somebody else. That feels too big. That feels like it's not something that I have time for, or would even know what to talk about for so many times. Because, you know, you start it and yeah, maybe you have something to talk about for the first episode, but then you've got a whole lot of more episodes to fill up. And so again, it was one of those things that you know, it all comes back to God for me. Like, okay, like if you're calling me to this, then that's okay. I'm going to say yes, but then I'm going to need you to sustain it. I'm going to need you to give me the power and the strength and the creativity and the ideas for this to be something lasting. And I love watching him come through every single time. But yeah, the podcast I've enjoyed it actually way more than I expected. Not that I didn't think I would enjoy it at all, but I have really loved being able to kind of get those thoughts that are going on inside my own head about motherhood and putting it into an audio form and really being able to talk to people. I am a writer at heart for sure, but it's nice to get that audio angle too, where it's more it feels more like a conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we just talk about things that moms face as they are going through motherhood, and we look at it from the angle of what God would have us to do in those situations. I always say from the heart of Jesus, because whenever it says mommyhood empowered, the empowered part is that in order to get through motherhood, we have to have God filling us up and giving us wisdom and strength, really just to make it through the day. I wouldn't want to go through motherhood without it. It's a lot of challenges that I wouldn't know how to fix myself, but just knowing that I have somebody in my corner, somebody that actually knows the answer
Mm-hmm.
and can empower me to get through that situation that doesn't feel like I can get through, then it's great. And I just want to be there to encourage other mothers to remember that they have that in their arsenal too. They have God to help them out in those moments when they just don't know the answer. God has the answer.
And it's usually do you usually have guests, or is it typically just,
Yeah, it has just been me. Actually, this coming summer,
yes.
then I am going to start having guests for the first time, and I'm super excited about it.
I was gonna
I
say,
think
I
it's going
gotta
to be
hand
great.
it to you. It's tough to just go on by yourself and keep, I mean, kudos for being able to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll be honest, the main thing that why I haven't had the guests on is just because, technology, and it
Yeah.
makes me nervous.
Oh, yeah.
It's just something I haven't done yet. But just like when I recorded the first podcast, it's like, I hadn't done it and I didn't know what to do, but it was actually very easy. I always say everybody can, if you have a book that you want to write, you can write the book. If you have a podcast that you want to put out, you can put the podcast out. You really can.
You
So many
can.
things in our lives, we think they're so much bigger until we actually do them and we're like, oh, that wasn't actually so big. So I know that as soon as I do have a guest, and I'm going to be like, that was so easy. I could have had guests like forever
Yeah.
ago.
But that's okay.
But
It's
yeah, I'm super
also,
looking forward to it because I just love hearing other moms' views on things and the
yeah.
ways that they do things. And I think it just gives us all ideas. Even whenever I just meet a friend for coffee or a play date and we're just talking casually, I feel like I always leave with some kind of inspiration for how I can just make a little bit of change into my motherhood and make it better for us.
well, and you probably do that for whoever you're having coffee with. That sense of community is everything. And just like what you're saying, in everything we do, whether it's, family, the endeavors we go on, we have this idea, and then it's like, all right, I've got to turn this over to God in the universe because I'm going to need help on it, and let's see where it goes. And when
Yes,
it can turn
exactly.
into
Yeah.
these great things, it's fantastic. What's been one of your favorite podcast topics that you've covered? One of your favorite shows?
Oh, that would be hard to choose. I think I've really liked season 2 whenever I talked about imitating Christ, how
Okay.
moms can imitate Christ in our own lives. And the thought behind that is that our kids imitate us, whatever
Hmm.
it is that we do, for the good or the bad. I mean, even if it's the way you walk or the way you use your hand motions, I mean, kids, they imitate you. And so it's really important for moms to be imitators of Christ, because then whenever our kids imitate us, they are really imitating the nature and the character of Christ. And that's going to be so much easier than just sitting down and just teaching your kids, like, here's the 5 ways to forgive people. But whenever they can actually, in which that's fine, you can definitely tell them the 5 ways, or whatever many, but whenever they can just watch you living those things out in your own life, it just becomes so natural for them. And if we can, everything that I do is just setting my kids up for that future success. I don't think kids are too young to ever learn anything. So they are learning now at a young age how to have Christ-like qualities, how to imitate Christ themselves by imitating you. And then as they get into adulthood, it just becomes so much easier because they're not having to like relearn things. It's just innate in them. It's the way that they've just always been brought up. So I really like season 2. I don't know if there's a specific episode that I love in that. It's just the whole compilation of all of those
Yeah.
together. Because I think it gives moms a solid foundation to kind of focus on themselves,
Mhm.
something that they can change. And then by default, you're actually making those changes in your children that you want to see by you changing yourself.
You've probably already had a lot of proud parent moments. You're going to have more, but what's one that stands out right now so far that you're like, wow, my little sponges did get that from me and my husband, or whatever the case is? What's something that has stood out to date?
Yes, I think that probably the biggest one that I can remember right now,
Yeah.
it happened a couple of months ago, and I had gotten an email from a library in Wisconsin,
Okay.
and they said that they had chosen my What Did Your Dinosaur Do Today book as their from Missouri. I guess they were choosing like one book from each of the states. It was during like a Dr. Seuss week. I can't remember what it America, I think is maybe what the called. But so they were having that at their library. They do it in libraries and schools. But anyway, so they had chosen the dinosaur
Hmm.
book for that. And I just thought that's really crazy that like Wisconsin, like if it was somebody in Missouri, I'd be like, okay, well, they probably knew somebody that knew somebody that knew
Sure.
somebody. But Wisconsin, I just thought was totally off the grid. To my knowledge, I've never sold by
Right.
hand any book to anybody in Wisconsin for them to ever have my name. So later that day, before we were getting ready to go to bed, I was sitting in there with my son and I said, "Hey, buddy, like, guess what happened?" And so I told him that I got the email and that they were gonna that was the book that they had chosen for Missouri for that week. And he was like, "Mom," he was like, "we need to praise God." And
Oh,
so he was like, "We need to play." There's a song called "The Great Commission." And so he was like, "Alexa, play," he told Alexa to play that song. And so I just thought that was great because he realized I didn't connect those dots. Like I had already thought that earlier in the day and sent text messages to friends like, "Hey, look what God did. Like he sent my book to Wisconsin. That's
right.
crazy." But I never said anything like that to him. I just simply told him the story that like I'd gotten this email from Wisconsin, they'd chosen our book and he connected those dots for himself and he did
Oh,
like the very thing I had done like a few hours earlier. And it was
yeah.
the sweetest moment because we like sat there in his bed and we sang that song together and it just made my heart so happy that he was noticing God in the details and like giving him honor for the things that happens to us because it's
Right.
not it wasn't me. I didn't run that book down to Wisconsin and say, "Hey, you want to pick this for the Missouri state?" It was however ended up happening there. I don't know, but I do know that God's hand was in it.
Oh, well, congratulations on your books, your podcast, your family support, and what you're doing in the community. I appreciate your time. I hope you'll come back. And it's been a delight to talk to you.
Yes, it's been so fun to talk to you too.
Thanks so much. We'll have you back anytime you want to come back. Be sure you're following along. Link over to watch all of the podcasts from runradio.net.